I used to count chairs at family gatherings. Not people, just chairs. It wasn't a game. It was more like reading tea leaves. Chairs told you who mattered, who was expected, who had become an afterthought. When there was one less, it meant someone had been quietly pushed out. When there was one more, someone new had taken root. This year, I didn't bother counting. I already knew there wasn't one for me. The message came midweek, tucked in between a Walgreens coupon email and a newsletter from a church I no longer attended. Subject line: just a heads up about Saturday. No capital letters, no greeting. Brooke never wasted words when she didn't need something. Inside it read, "We've decided to keep the remembrance small and private this year, just me and the kids. I hope you understand the need for closure in our own way. No address, no time, no mention of my name, just space. The kind of space you leave when you've already closed a door and walked away." I stared at the screen until it went black, then touched the trackpad to wake it again. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for me to write something back. I didn't. My coffee had gone cold by then, and a dark ring bled into the paper towel under the mug. I moved the cup aside but didn't mop the stain. The paper would dry, but the shape would remain. Later that evening, I opened Facebook. I hadn't meant to. It was habit, the kind that comes from reaching for something familiar when you're already too tired to be disappointed. The photos had been posted just 2 hours earlier. Brooke standing between Lila and Max, all three in pale blues and whites, in front of the house I once called home. White roses in a vase, floating candles, a soft script across the screen that read, "Honoring Thomas with light." I noticed the ottoman was gone, Thomas's favorite. He used to rest his feet on it while helping Max with his reading, replaced now by a marble side table with gold legs and nothing on top but symmetry. I counted 8 chairs. None were mine. I scrolled through the comments. Beautiful tribute. He'd be so proud. Love this. Family first always. Not one name I recognized from my side. Not one face from the hospital. No Cousin Jenny, no Aunt June. People who sent flowers, who sat with me while Thomas slept. Who whispered when they brought casseroles, "You're stronger than I'd be." I tried to log into the bank account Thomas had set up for me years ago. It was modest, but dependable grocery money, gas, the occasional haircut if I scheduled it right. The login failed. I checked the numbers again. Still no access. A red banner blinked. This account has been closed. Not frozen, not needs attention, just closed. I sat still for a long time, then closed the laptop gently, as if the machine might absorb my questions if I moved too quickly. 2 days later, the text came. 1 line. "Tommy's gone. Please stop making this about you." I didn't reply. I put the phone face down on the kitchen counter next to the tea towel I still used from when Lila spilled red punch at her 5th birthday party. The faint pink stain never quite washed out, and I never quite wanted it to. I didn't cry. Not then. I opened the silverware drawer instead and rearranged the forks. I wiped the counter again, though it was already clean. I lined up the mugs by height. There's comfort in order when everything else has unraveled quietly behind you. That night, I unfolded the quilt Thomas gave me for Christmas. It still held a corner of cedar from the storage chest and a loose thread near the binding I hadn't mended. I ran my finger along the seam. Inside, the batting had begun to thin. Brooke used to say I was too sentimental, that objects should be replaced when they outlived their usefulness. I never argued. I just kept the old ones folded quietly behind the new. When Thomas was alive, my place in the house was never in question. Not official, maybe, but understood. I filled lunchboxes, kept track of Max's inhaler, baked the banana bread Brooke never had time for. She'd thank me sometimes with a nod or a sentence like, "You're a lifesaver, Geraldine." But after the funeral, she started calling me Tommy's mother to her friends, as if I were a distant relative whose title was a formality, not a relationship, not a grief. I remember the first time she introduced me like that, at the wake. "This is Tommy's mother, Geraldine. No hour, no warmth." She didn't say it cruelly. That was what made it effective. I used to think silence was a virtue, that if I just stayed out of the way, didn't raise my voice, didn't complain, people would know I was trying to help. That being good would be enough. That being steady counted for something. I know better now. Being good doesn't make you indispensable. It just makes it easier for them to leave you behind when the room gets crowded. I went back to the Facebook post once more. Max had a pin on his collar. I couldn't make it out. Leela held a rose, her hand wrapped so tightly around the stem that the thorns must have left marks. I wondered if she'd cried that day, if anyone noticed, if she even remembered the way we used to make cinnamon toast on Saturdays while her mother slept in. Brooke smiled in every photo. The camera loved her. It always had. They didn't look like they missed me. They looked rehearsed, soft-lit, edited. My absence didn't unbalance the frame. It gave it symmetry. The next morning, I folded the tea towel with the pink stain and tucked it into a drawer. I placed the broken reading glasses in a box with old cards and school drawings. A necklace Thomas made me in second-grade string and 2 beads, 1 blue, 1 gold. Then I sat at the kitchen table and watched the morning light touch the coffee ring I hadn't wiped away. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I simply stopped counting chairs. Most of the time, I found it easier to agree, even when no one asked my opinion. Brooke liked her kitchen spotless after 6. That wasn't a rule written on paper, but it was understood, like the way she labeled things in the fridge or left certain utensils pointed a certain way. If I happened to boil pasta at 6:15, she'd drift in pause and rest her hands flat on the counter. That was enough. I started cooking earlier. I never brought it up. Thomas once left his socks in the dryer, and when she found them still damp in the drum, she looked at me. Just briefly. Then at the socks again. He apologized before I could say anything. Later that evening, he told me Mom just try to keep things simple for her. It's not easy juggling everything. I folded his socks in silence that night. Matched the pairs, even the worn ones. I never asked for keys to the house. I didn't keep my shoes by the front door. Mine stayed in a bin by the laundry room beside the broom and extra paper towels. I swept the hallways when no one was around and refolded the towels in the linen closet when I couldn't sleep. Lila once drew a picture of the family. 6 people herself. Max, Brooke, Thomas, their dog, and a woman in the corner with white hair. No name under the figure. When I asked about it, she said, "That's the helper." Like in that book about the bunny. Brooke smiled. She means well. I ironed Brooke's blouses for her conferences and never asked how long she'd be gone. The instructions were usually texted the night before. Pick up Max by 2:30. He has gym. Or Lila likes honey, not sugar, in her oatmeal now. I followed them like recipes from a book written for someone else's kitchen. Thomas used to wink at me in passing. A small flicker of something unspoken. Once he handed me a little package in the hallway, a pin with a sunflower on it. He murmured, "Thought it looked like you." Brooke walked by just after and asked if I needed help figuring out how to open it. During Max's 8th birthday, I stood behind the table refilling juice cups and cutting grapes into halves. Brooke clinked a fork against her glass and introduced the guests around the table. "This is my sister, and this is Max's godmother. That's our neighbor from the HOA. She didn't mention me. Someone asked if I was the caterer. I smiled and nodded. The photo posted afterward showed Max grinning behind a chocolate cake. My shoulder was in the frame, half cut off, half faded. A corner presence. Brooke tagged every adult in the photo except me. I thought maybe she forgot. I wore a blue sweater that day, one I'd knit during Thomas's chemo treatments. He said the color reminded him of the lake near our old house, the one we used to visit on Saturdays, with a picnic and a bag of stale bread for the ducks. I stopped wearing it after that party. It still hangs in my closet, folded at the back, behind an umbrella I no longer use. When the children were sick, I sat beside them with a cool cloth, reading from the same picture books over and over. The Red Bicycle Henry's Big Tree Cloud Soup. Brooke never corrected me, never commented on the titles. But once while organizing the bookshelves, I noticed those three had been tucked away in a top cabinet. She said they were too sentimental. Thomas once brought home takeout and told Brooke he wanted a night off from clean eating. She laughed but scraped most of her portion into the trash when she thought no one saw. The next morning, I found the container in the bin with only the steamed vegetables eaten. The rest smelled of lemon and pepper. She told the kids she didn't like grease. When I packed Lila's lunch one Monday, I wrote a note inside. "You are braver than you feel today." Later that week, Brooke texted me a picture of the note with a single line underneath. "Let's keep things neutral in their bags, please." No need for quotes. I stopped writing them. I learned the art of invisibility in small gestures. Letting the other person go first at the table. Cleaning without making noise. Laughing quietly during TV shows I didn't like. Listening when Brooke vented about parents at school, teachers' lines at the pharmacy. Once she looked up from her phone and said, "You're easy to live with. I'll give you that." It was meant as praise, I think. Thomas never saw the notes I removed from the kids' backpacks. Birthday party invitations where my name had been crossed out and replaced with guardian. Volunteer sign-up sheets addressed to parents only. I filed them away in a drawer I kept locked. Not because I wanted proof, because I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. I've never liked conflict, not even as a girl. My mother once told me, "Geraldine, if you bite your tongue too long, you'll forget what your own voice sounds like." I think I laughed. Maybe I believed I was being noble, but maybe I was just afraid. People mistake silence for goodness all the time. They think if you're quiet, you must agree. That if you step aside, you don't mind being passed over. That if you smile long enough, you'll stop feeling the stretch in your face. I don't blame them. I made it easy. Even now, I wonder if I helped erase myself. Not all at once. Not out of weakness. Just little by little, with every folded sock, every unopened envelope, every bite of dinner served just the way she liked it. The ring Thomas gave me sits in a ceramic dish by my bed. I take it off when I sleep now, not because it's loose, my fingers haven't changed, but because I'm not sure what it means anymore. Not when there's no name for what I became in that house. I was never unkind. But I suppose being kind was never enough. And maybe that's the quietest way a person disappears. Sometimes I wonder if I was ever really in the pictures or just a shadow someone forgot to edit out. The Thanksgiving card last year arrived late, 3 days after the meal. A printed photo, glossy and white-edged, with Lila and Max holding tiny pumpkins in front of the fireplace. Thomas stood behind them, his hand resting lightly on Brooke's shoulder. I wasn't in the image. I wasn't in any of them. I'd made the cranberry sauce from scratch that morning, peeled the sweet potatoes while Brooke made a show of arranging table settings in copper and cream. She said neutral tones photographed better. I asked her later if maybe mine had been sent to the wrong address. Her fingers kept scrolling through her phone. Probably got lost. Mail's slow this time of year. There was a whole drawer in the hallway full of unused cards. Max won second place at the science fair in March. He made a solar oven using aluminum foil cardboard and a leftover pizza box. We'd worked on it every evening for almost 3 weeks. He burned his first marshmallow, laughed too loud, asked if I could help him write a line about renewable energy that sounded more impressive. Brooke posted a photo of him holding the certificate. The caption read, "Like mother, like son. So proud of my little scientist." There were 183 likes. I remember the shape of the blister on his thumb, the way he winced but didn't cry, the way he whispered, "Don't tell Mom I messed it up." At the spring parent conference, I shook hands with Lila's teacher. She smiled and thanked me for walking her to school each morning. I nodded, a little embarrassed. It didn't feel like much, just routine. Brooke stepped forward, tucked her bag higher on her shoulder. "She's just around during the day," her voice crisp, not unkind. "We appreciate the help." I became around. I stitched Halloween costumes for both children the year Thomas was too tired to help carve pumpkins. Max wanted to be a dragon and Lila a clock. I spent nights sewing green scales, gold numbers, and trimming elastic to fit their little wrists. The morning of the school parade, Brooke held the outfits up, then placed them gently back in the hallway closet. "We're going with store-bought this time," she said. "They look more polished in photos." Lila's dress came in a plastic sleeve with cardboard backing, the tag still dangling from one sleeve when she wore it to school. I left the handmade ones on the chair by the laundry room for 3 days before folding them into a plastic tub marked seasonal. Thomas noticed once. He opened the lid to put away a scarf and paused when he saw the dragon tail. He didn't say anything, just ran his hand over the fabric once, then closed the lid and let it click back into place. There was a magnet on the fridge that said, "Home is where your people are." I stopped reading it after a while, like wallpaper or calendar pages from 2 months ago. You know they're there, but your eyes learn to slide past them. I kept my mug on the second shelf behind the tall glasses. Brooke's were white and stackable with gold rims. Mine was chipped blue porcelain from a church bazaar in Ohio. Thomas once called it the lucky one because he always pulled it from the dishwasher without thinking. I used it less and less. The chip began to look like something offensive, a mark that didn't belong in a row of gleaming ceramic. Once Brooke asked if I could step outside while she filmed a product demo in the kitchen. "Something for a brand deal," she explained. "A mother-daughter baking set. I just need a clean frame," she said. "No distractions." I sat on the back steps with the dog listening through the window as she coached Lila on which phrases to say, how to smile without looking too excited. There's a kind of performance to everything now, even birthdays. For Lila's 9th, I wrapped a book she used to read when she was 4. I'd kept the original copy, the one with a little jam smudge on the second page. I tied it with ribbon, placed it beside the rest of the presents in the living room. When she opened it, Brooke said, "That's cute. Maybe we'll find a place for it in the nostalgia box." I didn't know there was a box. There was a photograph taken that day, Lila blowing out candles, her mouth mid-wish. I stood behind the camera, hands folded. Not because anyone asked me to, but because there was no more room around the cake. The copy I printed curled at the edges from the heat of the printer. I pressed it flat between the pages of my recipe book. I used to think I just needed more time, that maybe one day Brooke would soften, that being present, reliable, invisible in the right ways would earn a kind of quiet belonging. The kind no one names out loud but holds open like a door left unlocked. But memories don't work like that. They're not given. They're constructed, chosen, cropped. And I was always standing just outside the frame. Once, I overheard Brooke on a phone call. She was listing people to invite to a fundraiser. I only caught one line, "She lives with us," but it's not like she's really part of things. Not cruel, not said with malice, just sorted, filed away. I folded a dish towel in the next room and pressed my palm hard over the edge of the counter. Thomas never talked like that. When he was younger, he used to call from his office and ask if I could stay with the kids just a little longer. Sometimes he'd add, "You make it feel like home when I can't." Maybe that was once true. Maybe a house stops being a home the moment you start asking if you still count. I never slammed a door. Never raised my voice. I simply became quieter than the music playing from the smart speaker. Quieter than Brooke's footsteps on the stairs. Quieter than the children's voices as they practiced spelling words I'd once helped them learn. There's a drawer in my old bedroom that holds a bracelet Max made from plastic beads. He'd spelled my name wrong. Geraldine. I never corrected him. I kept it. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was one of the last times someone called me something that belonged to me. And now when I open that drawer, I don't look at the bracelet. I look at the space beside it, the part where something should be. I used to leave my shoes by the bench just inside the front door, a small habit, unspoken. No one liked tracking gravel into the kitchen. The soles were worn smooth, the left one slightly caved, where my heel pressed too hard. That day they were not there. The doormat was new, blue with white cursive that read the Bennetts. I had never seen it before. I stood still for a moment, grocery bag in one hand, the other searching for the key I always kept clipped to the inside of my purse. I turned it as usual, but it met resistance. Not rust or damage. A click that didn't belong to me. Brooke appeared on the porch, arms folded. No makeup this time, just a clean face, and hair pulled back too tightly, like someone preparing for a workout or a negotiation. Her eyes didn't meet mine right away. They hovered just above my shoulder as if I were standing in front of something larger she'd rather not face directly. We've changed the locks. It's time. The bag in my hand began to tremble a little. I tightened my grip. One of the apples shifted inside and bumped against a can of soup. "I need to get my coat," I said. Brooke shifted her weight. Her voice came flat-clipped. "I already packed what you might need. It's in the garage." "What about the kids?" "They need stability. I've spoken to a counselor. Your presence has become confusing." I looked down at my shoes. Not there. Not anywhere. They never said that. They don't have to. It's not healthy for them to be around so much. Grief. She didn't say you, just grief. A floating shadow detached from me but hung around my neck all the same. I haven't said a word about I know, but you don't have to speak it. It's in the way you sit at breakfast. It's in your face when you fold their pajamas. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. A neighbor was watering a bush across the street, slow and steady. The sound of the hose hissed like static in the distance. Brooke stepped down one stair. "Tom's gone. I think it's time you learned to survive on your own." There wasn't a raised voice. Not even tension. Just a line drawn, measured, and quiet. I walked around to the garage. A box sat near the recycling bins, labeled "Mom" in thick black marker. I didn't look inside right away. I waited until I reached Diane's car, where the passenger seat still smelled faintly of cinnamon gum and fabric softener. Diane didn't ask questions. She handed me a roll of paper towels and a granola bar. She'd always been like that, practical, not prying. She didn't try to fill the silence. "I can get you into the weather campgrounds near Fairmont. They don't ask much. Just stay quiet, blend in." That night, I spread a borrowed sleeping bag on the plastic mat inside the shelter. The lights flickered every so often. A few people shuffled past, voices muffled beneath the sound of wind against canvas walls. I used my coat as a pillow. There's a certain type of cold that doesn't settle on your skin. It slips beneath your collar into the space behind your ribs. It lingers long after you've covered yourself. I held Thomas's scarf, still carried it folded in the inner pocket of my bag. Wool with a faded thread where he used to tug it too tightly at the neck. It didn't smell like him anymore. Just like storage. The second day, I went to the school. Not to speak. Just to see. I stood behind the iron fence near the back lot where the buses pull in. I kept my hands in my pockets and watched the children tumble out of the gym doors in waves, backpacks bouncing, voices high and uneven. Lila's hair was shorter now. Brooke must have cut it. She used to cry if I even trimmed her bangs. Max had grown taller. His sleeves stopped an inch too short. Neither of them looked toward the fence. A man approached from the side, a neon vest clipboard in hand. "You're not on the pickup list." I didn't reply. "We've had instructions. No contact without written approval." His voice wasn't harsh. Just rehearsed. Like he'd said it before, maybe, to someone like me. I nodded once and left. 2 days later, a voicemail came. "If you keep showing up, I'll take them to Oregon. Don't make this harder." No greeting, no goodbye. I played it once, then deleted it. Not because I disagreed, but because there was nothing more to learn from it. At the shelter, someone handed me a plastic fork with my dinner, a small kindness. Most nights there were only spoons. I sat on a folding chair and watched someone draw hearts on the wall using ketchup packets. The ink from the wall sign bled slightly in the humidity. Don't become what broke you. The next morning, I opened the envelope Diane had handed me 3 days earlier. I'd tucked it into the lining of my purse, too unsure to read it before. It was from Thomas's attorney. A letter short, but not rushed. Not. In the event of my death, my mother, Geraldine Monroe, is to receive the sum of $84,000 to be used at her discretion. In addition, full custodial rights are granted to her should the children be denied access to her for reasons not based on proven harm. I didn't cry. I folded it once, then again, and slid it back where it came from. Some people might call that hope. I thought about the sound Max used to make when he blew bubbles in his milk, about how Lila always picked the orange crayon first, even when drawing the sky. I hadn't realized how loud silence could be until those small sounds were gone. I touched the scarf again that night, held it between both hands. It didn't bring warmth, but it reminded me I'd once been called Mama, then Mom, and for a while, Grandma. Now I held on to nothing but the last word that still belonged to me. I used to believe silence was something that happened to you, a punishment or a void left behind by someone else's absence. I hadn't realized it could be something you choose. The cabin was no more than a tool shed, barely wide enough for a cot and a chipped metal table. The roof sagged in the middle, like it had forgotten how to bear weight. The back window was cracked along one edge, taped years ago with something that had long since peeled. I swept the dust out in lines with an old shirt I found under the porch. There was no mailbox, no name on the door. When Diane asked if I wanted help applying for housing, I said I would handle it. She offered to lend me her iPad, but I told her the library had public computers. That was enough. I walked there each morning, same shoes I'd worn through 3 winters. I passed a man who sold sun-faded peaches out of the back of his truck. He never looked up. The woman at the front desk gave me the same smile every day. Small, polite, uninvested. I liked that about her. The library's keyboard had 2 sticky keys, the L and the spacebar. I had to hit them both twice. I filled out forms for senior aid and clicked through listings of shared rentals. Most were too expensive or too far. I bookmarked them anyway. One afternoon, the librarian walked past my screen. She glanced over. Still looking, I nodded once. She tilted her head. Family not nearby, I kept my hands on the keyboard. They're figuring things out. She smiled again, the same as before, then moved on. No follow-up. Just silence with a shape I could accept. That evening, I folded my laundry at the lake's edge, rinsed in cold water, and hung along the cabin railing. I had a green shirt I'd worn when Max was born. It had a missing button and a stain near the hem from tea, but I couldn't part with it. I didn't wear it anymore. I just folded it carefully each week and put it back in the bag. A couple camped 2 spots away, young, maybe late 20s. They played cards at night with the kind of laughter that didn't mind being overheard. One morning, I caught the woman watching me as I stirred powdered milk into instant coffee. She didn't say anything, just nodded at me and kept walking. I didn't nod back. Brooke posted a photo 2 weeks in. A picnic table spread with cupcakes and party hats. Lila wore a dress I hadn't seen before. Max held a plastic trophy. The caption read, "We're doing just fine." I stared at the image for a moment, then clicked the red X in the corner of the screen. I haven't gone back since. I didn't call. I didn't send a card. I stopped logging in. There was a rusted pocket mirror I kept in my bag, the kind with a velvet lining that had lost its plushness over time. It belonged to my own mother once. When I opened it one morning, I noticed a hairline crack had formed across the glass, right through the center of my reflection. I didn't flinch. I just tilted it until my face disappeared. Thomas used to tell me, "Mom, you always want to fix things before they're broken." He meant it as a compliment, I think. But not everything wanted to be fixed. One day I walked to the edge of town where an old community center offered free flu shots. The nurse there handed me a clipboard and pointed to a bench. I sat alone, filled in my name, date of birth, last known address. Under emergency contact, I paused. Eventually, I wrote, "None." The nurse didn't ask. She just checked my pulse and said, "You're doing okay." Maybe she said that to everyone, or maybe she meant it. I nodded either way. I passed by a thrift store on the way back. In the window, there was a small wooden sign with painted letters that read, "You don't need to explain your piece." I didn't buy it, but I stood there longer than I meant to. One evening, it rained through the broken part of the roof. I moved my cot sideways and caught the drips in a plastic bowl. The rhythm was almost musical. I watched the water rise slowly in the bowl, round and quiet. I didn't empty it until morning. I started writing my name on the inside cover of books I borrowed. Just my name. No address, no number. Just to see it printed somewhere. One Tuesday, a woman asked me for directions at the bus stop. Her sweater had tiny pearls sewn into the collar. She looked lost, out of place. "Do you live around here?" she asked. I paused, then nodded. "I live quietly." She smiled as though that made sense. No one pressed further. And I found myself grateful for people who accept short answers. The day I received a letter from social services confirming my senior housing appointment, I folded it into fourths and kept it in my back pocket. I didn't call Diane. I didn't tell anyone. I wasn't hiding. I was just present, finally, on my own terms. Sometimes people walk past the cabin and glance inside. Some wave. Some don't. I no longer wait to see. If anyone asks where I'm staying now, I simply say, "I'm learning how to exist without noise, and for now, that's enough." I used to think names held me together, wife, mother, grandma. Without them, I noticed how quiet the world became when no one needed you to answer. The corner of the tarp had torn in the storm last week. I patched it with duct tape and a piece of an old canvas grocery bag. The wind still slipped through at night. It curled under the blanket and pressed against my ankles the way cold water used to creep under the back door of our basement in winter. I kept my coat on inside. Not out of stubbornness, just out of habit. The zipper had long since rusted. One of the buttons had fallen off when I stood too quickly trying to catch the kettle before it spilled. I held it in my palm for a long time afterward, wondering if I should sew it back or let it go. Most days passed in a slow rhythm. I walked 2 miles to the library with a reusable cup of instant coffee in hand and a slip of notebook paper in my pocket with addresses of food pantries or temporary housing notices. I read. I watched. I kept quiet. When I spoke, it was only because someone needed a signature or a name on a form. No one ever asked what I used to be. They didn't need to. I carried it in the way I folded napkins at the soup kitchen, in the way I waited for children to pass first at the crosswalk. I still flinched when someone spoke sharply nearby, still turned my head when I heard a child cough. Once, I saw a little girl drop her mitten near the bus shelter. She didn't notice. Her mother pulled her ahead too fast. I picked it up and placed it on the bench beside me. The mother never looked back, but the girl did, just once. I slept with my shoes tucked inside the blanket. Not for fear of theft, but because the nights crept in suddenly, and waking up barefoot meant losing heat before you realized it. On the 30th day, I woke with an ache in my lower back that reminded me I hadn't slept on a real bed in weeks. I shifted my weight onto my side, watching the flame from the tea candle dance inside its glass. My hands hovered over it, palms out, as if searching for permission to still feel warmth. It was Tuesday when I received the envelope. The librarian tapped the desk with 2 fingers as if alerting me without words. The name on the return address stopped my breath in the chest. Calvin Rhodes. His handwriting hadn't changed. Inside was a notarized letter from his law office. I read it 3 times. Not quickly, word by word. I used the edge of my thumbnail to crease the bottom of the page because otherwise my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Thomas had prepared a separate clause in his will. If I were ever removed by force or implication from his home or from contact with Max and Lila, the inheritance would pass directly to me. Unrestricted. $5.2 million. Another document was attached, marked in blue ink. A copy of his final wishes regarding custody, should Brooke interfere with my bond to the children. Legal guardianship would transfer. To me, it felt like standing in a room and discovering suddenly that someone had been listening all along. Not interrupting. Just listening. The final page bore Thomas's handwriting, slanted, familiar. I traced it with my eyes, but not my fingers. If you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't shield you from everything, but I've made sure you're not defenseless. They are your blood, and you are their home in ways Brooke will never understand. Please don't forget who you are. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a Ziploc bag. That night, I didn't light the candle. I sat instead with the envelope in my lap and the wind rattling the tarp again. A voice in my head echoed not Thomas's, but Brooke's the last time I'd been near the school. You make them nervous, always hovering like a shadow they didn't ask for. I hadn't replied then. I wouldn't now. I looked up at the black curve of sky above the nylon seams and wondered what it would feel like to be called Grandma again without it sounding like an inconvenience. There was no plan yet, no sudden motion, just the knowledge that someone had left a door open. I would not run toward it. I would sit by it, wait until I could breathe through it, and then walk. That night I dreamed of folding paper cranes from grocery receipts, one for every time I had bitten my tongue. One for each morning I made lunchboxes and signed reading logs. One for each bedtime story I never finished because a voice louder than mine said, "They're tired. That's enough." I woke without reaching for my coat. For the first time in months, I didn't need to warm my hands before opening the zipper. I looked down at the sealed envelope beside me and thought, he didn't just leave something behind. He left something forward. The quiet changes first. Not the noise that fills a room, but the absence of what used to follow it. A scent, a footstep, a tone. That's when I knew something had shifted. Not in them, in me. The apartment they'd arranged had a front door that shut completely. No wind curling under no warped wood. Just the soft catch of a latch that clicked when turned properly. I remember thinking it felt strange to trust a lock again. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and paper. Someone before me must have liked toast and lists. I found a pen wedged behind the radiator with someone's grocery notes still wrapped around it. Milk shoelaces, batteries, 1 lemon. I taped it to the fridge without knowing why. I was folding laundry when the knock came. Not rushed, not hesitant, just practiced. Through the peephole sunglasses, beige coat, white cup with a green logo. A woman who didn't look out of place anywhere. I opened the door halfway. She didn't wait. "I've been thinking," she began, latte tilted slightly, as if rehearsed, "about how things escalated. Maybe we all said things that didn't come out right." Her voice had the tone of someone who knew exactly how things had come out. "I just feel like maybe if you wanted to see Max and Lila again, it wouldn't be such a bad idea. For them, I mean." I didn't answer. She shifted her weight. "I mean, after everything, it just seems silly to keep holding on to grudges. Kids need stability, right?" Still, no answer. She lowered her glasses slightly. "Also, I heard about the inheritance." I looked at the chipped edge of the doorframe where someone once tried to hang a coat hook, but didn't finish the job. "I'm not asking for anything big, just enough to make sure they don't feel the ripple of all this drama. A small gesture. You understand." I closed the door gently, not out of cruelty, just necessity. The next morning, her name showed up under a tagged photo Max with a homemade pancake Lila in a dress that still had my stitches in the hem. Caption, "Love means forgiving even when it's hard. Family first. Grace wins." That was the first of several. Another one. 2 days later, a picture of Brooke reading a book on parenting beside a quote graphic, "Strong mothers raise strong children." No message, no contact, no apology. At the next legal meeting, Calvin passed me a document to initial. It was about supervised visitation protocol. A manila envelope lay beside it, sealed and heavy with notarized weight. I held the pen loosely between my fingers. "You're entitled to be there," he said, not unkindly. "They can't block that anymore." The classroom door clicked when I entered. Max sat near the window, arms crossed tight the way he always did when concentrating. A staff member nodded and stepped outside, leaving us in a quiet too wide for the room. His voice didn't crack when he spoke. "Mom said you left because you didn't want to share money." I didn't correct him. I watched the way his shoelaces were 2 different colors. He never liked matching them. "She said you picked money over us." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a scrap of notebook paper. It had a drawing he once made of our backyard. The peach tree in the corner, the bird bath, the bench. I unfolded it and set it on the desk between us. "That was from 2nd grade, he murmured, eyes tracing the crooked tree. I nodded. The paper had been folded and unfolded so many times it held the softness of fabric. He didn't say more. I didn't expect him to. When the counselor returned, Max looked at her and asked, "Can I go back to class now?" Later that week, Brenda Tate's name began circulating online. A small-town journalist who somehow got hold of Calvin's filing records. The headline didn't scream. It whispered, "Abandoned grandmother inherits millions from late son." But there's more to the story. No names. But the dots weren't hard to connect. Brooke changed her social media bios to private. Her public posts shifted tone. She began quoting scripture. She shared throwbacks. She updated her profile picture to one of the children in matching church clothes standing beside her with forced smiles and pressed collars. The silence from her phone remained louder than anything she posted. At the grocery store, a woman I didn't know said, "I read something the other day. Thought of you." She didn't elaborate, just handed me a coupon for tea and kept walking. I started noticing things I hadn't before, like the way the apartment light hit the edge of the countertop at 4 p.m., the slow blink of the answering machine when no one called the shape of quiet that held no edge anymore. I still kept the envelope from Calvin in the top drawer. Not for the money, for the handwriting. I hadn't touched the balance yet. I bought what I needed, not more. When Brooke's email came 2 weeks later, it read, "Let's work this out civilly. I know things got out of hand. I just want what's best for the kids. We can figure out a reasonable way to split everything. Maybe revisit the custody thing later." She didn't use my name. I closed the laptop and unplugged it from the wall. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a warm mug between both hands, steam rising and fogging the tips of my glasses. I didn't sip. I just let the heat settle into my palms. Not every knock on the door is worth answering. There's a quiet you earn, not the kind handed to you in pity, but the kind that comes after you've stopped explaining. I started carrying a cloth-bound notebook with me. The pages weren't lined, and that made writing in them feel less like keeping records and more like breathing. Some entries were half-finished thoughts. Others were just the names of things I'd learned to do, again, boil eggs, without rushing, hold a door open for someone without shrinking, read aloud without losing my place. The library offered classes on Tuesday mornings. The room smelled faintly of printer toner and old carpet, but the instructor was patient. Retirement. Financial tools was printed on the board. I didn't speak much, just listened and underlined words in the workbook: self-sufficiency, long-term yield legal consent. One of the women in class wore a scarf with tiny ducks printed on it. She leaned over once and whispered, "Took me 5 years to say no and mean it." "You?" I didn't answer. But I thought about the first time I'd sent something back without apology. A box had arrived from Brooke, a sleek kit of creams and powders glossy with promise. Inside a note folded like a secret. "Let's keep things smooth between us." I resealed the box and added a single slip of paper. "I don't need mirrors. I need truth." At the library's children's hour, I read from worn books, with corners softened by years of handling. Sometimes, my hands shook slightly, turning the pages, but the children never noticed. Or if they did, they never mentioned it. I began to look forward to the hush that came when a story began, how even the noisiest child would go quiet when the words found rhythm. That's where the social worker first asked me about park visits. Supervised brief, monitored through clear glass. I agreed. I didn't count the minutes, but I remembered them. Lila liked to braid grass into loops. She never said why. Max would throw pebbles into the pond, naming each one after a planet. This one's Neptune. That one's Mercury. He never asked me questions, but he didn't avoid my eyes. One day, Calvin slid a document across the table. His glasses had a small smudge near the top corner he hadn't noticed. "If you want full custody, the grounds are strong. We can move quickly." I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper, then looked past it. "I don't want to win them," I told him. "I want them to know they were never something to lose." He didn't argue. A few days later, a gold-embossed invitation came in the mail. School ceremony, suggested attire semi-formal. Brooke had handwritten a note at the bottom. "Let's show the press how families heal." I folded it in half, then in quarters, then dropped it into the shred bin beside the copier at the library. It didn't feel like rebellion, just alignment. The picnic that week was quieter. Max had a book on birds. Lila drew stick figures with long arm. When the social worker excused herself to take a call, Max looked at the sandwich I'd packed and asked, "Did you ever used to make these for Dad?" I nodded. He liked mustard. Not too much. He didn't smile, but he finished the sandwich. I kept the letters in a small cedar box, the kind with a sliding lid and the smell of something old and trusted. Lila had started writing them after the second visit. The first note was just one sentence. "Sometimes I open Daddy's picture and smell his shirt. Mom says not to talk about him, but I don't think smells can be dangerous." The handwriting changed over the weeks, bolder, less unsure. She wrote about her dreams, her books, a dog she wished she had. She never mentioned her mother. I never showed the letters to anyone, not even Calvin. Brooke sent another email after the ceremony. "They looked for you, thought you'd come. Maybe next time, don't be so dramatic." I didn't reply. I printed out a photo of Lila's second letter and tucked it behind the mirror in the hallway. Not to look at it often, but to know it was there. I placed the original back in the cedar box. When I walked past reflective surfaces now, I didn't flinch. I no longer expected to see someone unsure, waiting to be permitted back into a life. The woman in the scarf from class invited me for coffee once. I declined gently. I wasn't quite ready for shared cups and small talk, but I appreciated the offer. I wrote her name in my notebook beneath a date and a single word, maybe. The world didn't open for me all at once, but the ground stopped shaking. And sometimes that's enough. I don't think dignity ever arrives with a knock. It just stands quietly inside you one day, waiting for you to notice. A week before the custody hearing, I sat at the small wooden desk near my window and wrote a letter on lined paper. My handwriting had changed tighter, cleaner, less hesitant. The envelope was unsealed for a long time before I slipped the letter inside. I won't fight for control. But I also won't surrender what my son entrusted to me just because someone assumed I was too weak to protect it. I didn't sign it with my full name. Just Geraldine. That felt enough. Later that morning, I walked to the courthouse annex and filed a single-page document, a legal petition, to revert to my maiden name. It took less than 10 minutes. The clerk, a woman younger than my granddaughter, handed me the confirmation and said, "Ms. Holloway, it's official. Holloway." I hadn't used that name since I was 19. It sounded cleaner now, not lighter, but truer. I carried the form in my coat pocket like a pressed flower no one had seen bloom. In the afternoon, I made one final call to the realtor handling the house Tom had grown up in. The old Victorian with peeling shutters and a cracked porch, swing the house I had scrubbed clean every Sunday, even after he moved out. I signed the listing agreement. No hesitation, no second thoughts. The keys had long since felt unfamiliar in my hand. That evening, I packed away a few things, mostly papers, some photos the quilt my mother made before her hands went stiff with age. I kept the little wooden box with Lila's letters beside my bed. On its lid, she had once scrawled in pencil, "For Grandma only." The writing had faded, but I never traced over it. The next morning, a message buzzed on my phone. "Brooke, I didn't think you'd really go through with it. Selling the house. Changing your name. All this for what, some moment of self-importance. Anyway, I hope you enjoy your new life. We'll see how long it lasts." I read it twice, not out of shock, just habit. Then I deleted it. No reply, no screenshot, no discussion. There was nothing more to retrieve from that well. Later that day, a local reporter named Brenda Tate published a short piece in the Sunday supplement. She had interviewed me 2 weeks earlier at the library. Nothing flashy, no clickbait headline, just a black and white photo of me sitting in front of the bookshelf, eyes half turned toward the children's section. The title read, "The Grandmother Who Stopped Apologizing on Choosing Self-Respect Over Silence." She hadn't mentioned the money. She didn't need to. Her questions were about choices, not checkbooks. When I reread the article that evening, I noticed one line she quoted from our talk. Some people inherit houses. Some inherit grief. But if you're lucky, you learn how to carry both and still stand. I folded the page and tucked it behind the mirror frame in my room. Not to display, just to keep. In the days that followed, Brooke didn't call again. She posted a few vague notes online, something about betrayal, something about learning who really supports you. The words had no face, no child's name, no truth. Lila kept writing. Her latest letter was sealed with a sticker shaped like a sunflower. Inside, just one line stood out. Sometimes I try to remember Dad's voice, but now I only hear yours when I'm scared at night. I placed the letter in the box with the others, then closed the lid and left it untouched for the rest of the evening. Max remained quiet, but at our supervised library visits, he now sat beside me instead of across. Once, he reached for the same book I was holding and said, "I forgot you used to read this to me." No one said anything else. The silence stayed. It felt like a bridge under repair. Calvin asked if I wanted to submit additional evidence to the judge. The letters, the texts, the photos. I told him no. I'm not building a case. I'm building a place, I said. He nodded. That week I returned the expensive coat Brooke had left at my door weeks earlier. Still had the tag. I folded it neatly, wrapped it in the same store's paper bag, and left a note inside. I don't need wool to feel warm. I need truth. I didn't expect a response. I didn't get one. The night before the hearing, I sat with a mug of peppermint tea running my thumb along the edge of Tom's old pocket watch. It hadn't worked in years, but I still kept it wound. When it ticked even for a second, it felt like he was nearby. The sound was brief, but I didn't need it to last. I never rehearsed a speech for court. I didn't pick an outfit to impress. I just wore the navy cardigan with the frayed cuff, the one Max once hid his toy soldier in. I didn't take it out. I let it stay there. Quiet loyalty tucked deep where no one could accuse it of grandstanding. When I turned off the light that night, I thought of nothing except the sound of gravel under my feet. The feel of a door closing not with anger, but with intention. And I remember thinking there are endings that come with applause and others that arrive like a soft click. Mine was the latter. No lights, no curtain call, just the sound of my own name spoken in full, and a silence no one could interrupt. Some things hold warmth longer than others. Clay mugs, worn sweaters the inside of a child's palm when they fall asleep beside you. I kept the window slightly open this morning, just enough for the air to move the curtain. There's no need to measure the hours anymore. I move when they move Max, dragging his sneakers across the hallway, and Lila humming off key as she sets the spoons. I still wear the cardigan with the loose cuff. Thomas once tugged at it when he was 5 and asked why clothes grow tired. I told him fabric remembers. He laughed like I'd said something magical. The house we live in isn't large, but the table holds everything we need: a bowl of pears, a pair of scissors with a pink ribbon tied to one handle, 3 drawings taped to the fridge, Lila's handwriting under a sketch of a house that looks vaguely like ours. This is safe. The court decision arrived 6 weeks ago. No surprises, just final lines drawn. My name again on papers that said I would be the one to sign school slips, doctor visits, and permission forms. The ink barely dried when Max called from the porch, asking if we had enough flour left to bake again. He's back with his baseball team now. The coach handed me a clipboard and said, "You're better at calming them than I am." Max shrugged and called out, "She's tough when she needs to be," Lila whispered. Last night, Miss Casey said I talk about home like it's a person. I tucked the blanket higher. She added, I told her it is. Brooke comes twice a month. She stays for 1 hour, always supervised. The woman from child services sits quietly in the corner making notes. Brooke doesn't bring flowers. She brought a photo album last time. One she made herself, not glossy. No captions. Just moments frozen Thomas holding Lila in a striped blanket. Max asleep on his father's chest. Her voice sounded quieter. Not worn down, just no longer trying to echo. I didn't know what kind of mother I was. Maybe I still don't. But I want to start again. Not for me. For them. I didn't answer. I adjusted Lila's collar and placed the photo album on the bookshelf behind the heater. It's still there. The friends who once celebrated Brooke's every post have gone quiet. The kind of silence that settles when the performance ends and the lights stay down too long. She moved into a small apartment downtown, half the size of the old place. No more designer chandeliers or curated rooms. She works part-time now. Says she's learning to earn slowly. I haven't sent the message I drafted. It's still in the Notes app on my phone. Some wounds you don't heal from, but you learn not to touch them as much. There's no need. I opened the drawer beside the stove this morning, the one that holds loose rubber bands, folded bills, and the letter. His handwriting hasn't faded. The ink clings to the paper like it still has something to prove. If they ever call you a burden, remember who held this house together while no one looked. You've been the backbone. I only hope my kids feel that one day, too. I placed the letter beside a new photo. Me holding a mug, Max at my feet, trying to balance 3 candy canes between his fingers, and Lila mid-laugh, half buried in a pile of wrapping paper. We'd made our own Christmas cards. Not for mailing, just to pin on the wall near the pantry. Brooke sent a message last night. No greeting, just words on a gray screen. Didn't think you'd actually go through with all this. Guess you proved me wrong. I deleted it without opening the thread. The phone buzzed again 2 minutes later. I turned it face down and left it that way. Max asked me over breakfast if I could sew a patch on his jersey. Not because it was torn, but because he wanted it to look like it had been worn a long time. It should feel like history, he said. I nodded and handed him the thread. The lemon balm by the window needs trimming. Lila insists it stays wild. She says it smells like Sunday. I haven't corrected her. There's a quietness to this place that doesn't demand explanation. I still fold my towels a certain way. I still line the sugar jar against the back of the shelf so it doesn't slide. These small rituals keep the rhythm steady. I don't revisit the courtroom in my mind, or the hospital, or the bus stop. Those moments have already turned into stone behind me. What I hold now are the softer things, the way Lila reaches for my hand without looking, the scuff marks Max leaves on the floor, the sound of 2 children brushing their teeth at the same sink, no longer strangers in their own home. I don't need to be celebrated. I don't need to be forgiven. I'm not here to rewrite the past. I'm here to stir the soup, sweep the crumbs, keep the porch light steady. Some people think closure means winning. For me, it's having enough quiet to hear myself choose not to speak. And that, finally, is enough.